Live from Quito, Ecuador, I'm Soini Gray and this is From the South, the midday news brief from Tell Us Your English. We start this new edition right now. Cuba's Foreign Minister, Bruno Rodriguez, says that migration has been used as a form of aggression by the United States against Cuba, including the malicious assertion that Cubans continue to emigrate en masse. Speaking at Howard University in Washington, D.C., Rodriguez also announced new migratory regulations that will come into effect on January 2018. One of those measures include the admission of Cuban citizens who left the country illegally and the elimination of Cuban residency requirements for those children of Cuban residents who live abroad.
Finally, we're eliminating the register so that the foreign-born children of Cubans residing outside the country can get Cuban citizenship and identity. The U.S. government closes the door and Cuba opens it.
And in Puerto Rico, Governor Ricardo Rosselló announced the immediate cancellation of a $300 million contract aimed to restore power in the island after Hurricane Maria. The contract had been severely criticized after it was revealed that Whitefish Energy, a company with links to Trump donors, had only 2 permanent employees and obtained it without a competitive public bidding process. About 75% of the homes and businesses still have no electricity after Hurricane Maria hit the island in September.
We let them finish what they started, 2 transmission lines from Aguirre to Aguas Buenas, the 2 most important arteries feeding the north side of the island. As of yet, I have not spoken to them. It's something that should happen within the next hours. To talk about this cancellation and the way and form that we're going to perform it.
President Donald Trump's former campaign director, Paul Manafort, has been charged with conspiracy and money laundering as part of the special counsel investigation into alleged attempts by Russia to influence the U.S. presidential election last year. Manafort handed himself into the FBI in Washington, D.C. Manafort and his business partner, Rick Gates, who also worked on the Trump campaign, are accused of hiding millions of dollars they earned while working for the former president of the Ukraine, Viktor Yanukovych. So we go live to Washington, D.C. to our correspondent, Jorge Gestoso. So, Jorge, what exactly has happened today and how has the Trump administration reacted?
Well, the latest is that the 2 of them, we're talking Paul Manafort and Rick Gates, has been arraigned already here in Washington. They pleaded not guilty to the 12 charges that they've been accused of, mostly about conspiracy to the United States and also money laundering. We're talking about, in the case of Paul Manafort, $18 million. Supposedly, he has been laundered through different branches of interest. And what is very interesting also is that there is a 3rd person. We're talking about George Papadopoulos, that has been the foreign advisor to the campaign of Donald Trump, that by himself he has pleaded guilty of not releasing the communications that he has had between the campaign of Donald Trump and Russia. And that has opened the door, according to analysts, that he will be cooperating with this investigation that is being led by, talking about the special prosecutor, and that could be the most important part of what has been going on. What has been the reaction of Donald Trump? So far, he has distanced himself about these 2 characters. he mentioned that that has nothing to do with his campaign, that these incidents were supposed to happen before, he said, years before the campaign. But in the case of George Papadopoulos, that did happen, those connections between the campaign of Donald Trump and Russia, it did happen during his campaign. So mostly that has been read here in Washington as the very beginning of something that could be very important to decide the possible interference of Russia in the U.S. elections of 2016.
So, Jorge, quick question. The president continues to insist the whole investigation is fake news. Do today's events really threaten his administration?
We'll see in the long run. What President Trump has said during the weekend is that this is a witch hunt and there's nothing behind. And therefore, he said, rather than investigate my campaign, they should, as he usually does, they investigate, in the case of Hillary Clinton campaign, that supposed also to had contacts with the Russians. But so far, the spokeswoman we're talking at the White House that has been talking about an hour ago, she said that, again, the official line is these incidents that these people has been arraigned this afternoon happened in a total different and separate matter with Donald Trump's campaign. Therefore, there's nothing to do or nothing to fear for the future of Donald Trump administration.
Well, thank you for that very important update, Jorge Gestoso, right there in Washington, D.C. He's our Washington correspondent. Other news now. In nationwide protests, activists and supporters of the Green March organization have taken to the streets of the Dominican Republic against impunity and corruption. The protests were called by social and human rights organizations, trade unions, and community groups. In a wave of green demonstrators taking place in 50 municipalities against the impunity that protects government officials and institutions. Jamaican-born West Indies cricketer Chris Gayle has been successful in his defamation case against Fairfax Media. The Australian media company had published the account of a woman who said the sportsman exposed himself to her. The jury took less than 2 hours to return their not guilty verdict.
This is a serious thing, and these things do happen around the world, for sports people as well. But, like I said, whatever any particular person, whether it's from a man or woman perspective, if they believe in their right and they haven't done something wrong, they should always fight for their right and, stand for what they believe in. These things do happen.
Antigua and Barbuda has almost repaid its debt to the International Monetary Fund. Prime Minister Gaston Brown told his cabinet the Treasury still owes 35 million EC dollars remaining of the 320 million EC they first borrowed 7 years ago. This is a positive turn of affairs for the Caribbean country since the IMF had refused to discuss debt forgiveness after Hurricane Irma devastated Barbuda in early September. More news in a minute. Stay with us. The Colombian Indigenous National Organization has begun a national Minga mobilization, which includes several protests around the country. They're demanding the Colombian government fulfill its peace agreements, particularly the ethnic chapter, which promises to previously consult the communities. They're also condemning the murder of social leaders in the last few months.
We're here to inform the national and international community that from the first minute of today, October 30th, we began a national indigenous minga for the defense of life, territory, peace, and the fulfillment of the agreements with the indigenous people of Colombia.
The leader of the former guerrilla group, the FARC, Rodrigo Londoño, alias Timonchenko, who is now president of the new political party, the Alternative Revolutionary Force of the Commons, will be running for president of Colombia in the upcoming 2018 elections. The political party, formed after the guerrilla group decided to put their weapons down and sign a peace agreement with Colombia's government. It's waiting for the Colombian Electoral Council to give them the proper credentials so that they can effectively participate in next year's elections. Colombian President Juan Manuel Santos gave a report on the implementation of the peace agreement. The leader said the balance of affairs is positive, regardless of the difficulties and questioning from the communities currently on a national indefinite strike.
Given the criticism generated from diverse groups which have questioned the short and slow implementation of the peace agreements with the former rebels, President Juan Manuel Santos offered a report which he deemed positive. Santos also mentioned the killings of social leaders, that according to him the number of dead has risen to 47 and none of the dead follow any pattern.
La Fiscalía ya tiene información.
The prosecutor's office has the information of 50% of these cases, from which the biggest number of homicides is from personal reasons, and others were committed by criminal gangs. The ELN and their very low involvement of security forces, which represents the 5%.
Human rights defenders in this country rejected the comments from President Juan Manuel Santos about the killed social leaders. The groups also said that the implementation of the agreements doesn't even reach 20% of what was signed with the FARC in Bogotá at the Colón Theater.
El balance de la situación de derechos humanos es complicada.
The report when it comes to human rights is complicated. We have a report which shows that 116 leaders and human rights defenders were killed in 2016. And until now, they have killed 127. We can prove this. There are communities fighting to defend their assassinated leaders and villages. And all of this have been already sent to the national government.
Y sus comuneros asesinados.
For the campesinos, the little progress of what's been implemented is the main reason for them to declare the national indefinite strike, a mobilization which indigenous communities will join from Monday.
No se está implementando adecuadamente.
The peace agreement is not being implemented adequately. The starting plan for the peace agreement is not being consulted with indigenous peoples, and that won't be part of the agenda and request of these negotiations for the fulfillment of the agreement during this national strike.
Para el cumplimiento.
On November 17th, the validity of the express procedure that was approved to process everything concerning the peace process will end in the National Congress, and several projects are still far from being approved. These and other concerns were recently expressed by the communities in front of the United Nations Security Council.
This Monday, the nomination of candidates for the municipal elections is starting in Venezuela. The municipal elections will take place on December 10th. Political parties are asked to register their candidates for the 335 mayoral positions that would serve from 2018 to the end of 2021. The Venezuelan Electoral Council also announced that the state of Zulia, the process to repeat the election of the governor, will be held on that same day.
Once the period stipulated in the Zulia State Constitution was over, the local assembly declared the complete absence due to the fact that the elected governor refused to take the oath. And once the Constituent Assembly was notified of this complete absence, the Constituent Assembly called for new governor elections in Zulia State. This election will take place in December. And what is the Constituent Assembly intention with this? To protect the voters' right in Zulia State.
So to continue our conversation about the Venezuelan elections, our correspondent Regan Devines joins us live now from Caracas. Hi Regan. As we heard in today's report, the start of electoral registration for elections, December elections, is actually today. How is that process going?
Yeah, you're right. The CNE has begun that process of those municipal elections will be coming in December. Now, last week we had mentioned that the date was set. It wasn't set per se for December 10th, but it was a recommendation by National Constituent Assembly member Francisco Amiliar. He recommended the 10th of December. However, the CNE has not confirmed. They are yet to state exactly which date they will be choosing for the elections. But yes, the CNE, the process has begun for the candidate nominations. 335 mayors will be chosen throughout Venezuela. All this week, political parties will be invited to send in information on all of the candidates that will be taking part, who will be vying for that role. November 7th will be the day when political parties will have internal elections to decide which of their candidates will be officially vying for those positions in different municipalities. And a day later, the official candidate will be announced. Now as well, which is interesting, citizens are welcome to vie for those positions, but they just need to come with 5% of the signatures, 5% of the electorate of their municipality in the form of signatures as support to show to the CNE that yes, they have this amount of support and they are able and willing to participate in the municipal elections. Now, as you said as well in the information that you gave there, Zulia elections will be held on the same day for re-elections for the post of governor, because we know that governor-elect opposition Primera Justicia candidate Tomas Guanipa did not swear in front of the National Constituent Assembly and so lost that post. So the election will be happening again. Now, the opposition has responded to all of this that is happening this week. They had a press conference earlier today, and they reiterated, well, at least two of the Mud Coalition parties has reiterated or said that they will not participate in the municipal elections. Those are Voluntad Popular as well as Primera Justicia. Voluntad Popular had a press conference today, and Freddy Guevara, popular face here in Venezuela, he said that they will not be taking part, and this is quote as a mechanism of denunciation against the dictatorship, which is what they refer to Nicolas Maduro's government. He said they will be placing focus on the presidential elections will be coming next year. He said that they want to put everything in place. They want to create the atmosphere that will lead to a prosperous presidential elections. And they said they will do this through different means, through institutional pressure.
I'm going to have to interrupt you because we do have another interview. Joining us live from Puerto Rico is Rafael Bernabe. He's the leader of the Working People's Party, and he's their former presidential candidate. And we're going to talk to Rafael about that controversial Whitefish Energy Holdings contract that was recently cancelled. So, Rafael, thank you so much for joining us. What has been the reaction in Puerto Rico to the cancellation of the contract with Whitefish, actually?
Well, just about everybody is very happy that the agreement has been cancelled. As the details of this contract became public, more and more people began to demand that it be cancelled. This was a contract for $300 million. For a very small company, had only 2 employees in the state of Montana, a state that has basically no connection with Puerto Rico, economic or political. And they were put in charge of this process of reconstructing the electric system in Puerto Rico. And the government relinquished its right to audit how they use the funds. The government relinquished the right to impose penalties if they didn't complete the work on time. So there were many aspects of this contract that were very problematical, and people are very happy that it has been cancelled. Although we are concerned that now that contract has been cancelled, and given the lack of adequate response from the U.S. federal government to the emergency, the process of reconstructing and reestablishing the electrical service is going to be delayed. We already have been 40 days today without electricity in most of Puerto Rico.
So thank you very much for that update. That was Rafael Bernabe. He is the leader of the Working People's Party, and he is a former presidential candidate of that party for Puerto Rican elections. So we are going to be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome back. Catalonian Prime Minister Carles Puigdemont has traveled to Brussels along with members of his cabinet. After Catalonia declared independence, Spanish authorities charged Prime Minister Puigdemont and other Catalan leaders with rebellion, sedition and provocation charges. They also sacked the regional government. In response, Belgium's Asylum and Migrations Minister, Theo Franken, said Puigdemont could seek asylum in the country.
As State Attorney General, I inform you that the State's Attorney's Office, adhering to its constitutional mandate to promote legal action defending the law, the rights of citizens, and the public interest, has filed charges for rebellion, sedition and misuse of public funds, and other related charges against the main members of the Catalan government, that with their decisions and their actions over the last 2 years have caused an institutional crisis that ended with the unilateral declaration of independence, carried out with total disdain for our Constitution on October 27.
Realizada con total desprecio a nuestra Constitución.
Our correspondent in Madrid has more on the latest details.
There is a new twist in the political crisis that hit Spain and that continues to surprise us all. The former Catalan president, Carles Puigdemont, and part of his government, removed from office after Article 155 from the Constitution became effective, are now in Brussels, the capital of Belgium, to avoid Spanish justice. Several sources have now confirmed that Puigdemont traveled to Belgium after he was advised by a legal team that recommended he would stay there for the time being and even think about the option of applying for political asylum. This is a strategic action that has the objective to internationalize the Catalan conflict. The Spanish government can now issue an international detention order, and now the Belgian justice has the responsibility to execute this order or not. It's important to understand that the choosing of this country didn't happen by chance. Belgium is one of the countries that has a protectionist constitution in the European Union. There, Puigdemont will be able to defend himself from the prosecutor's allegations that is accusing him of rebellion, sedition, embezzlement of public funds. It's said that Puigdemont will create a sort of independent government in exile, but we don't know yet with how many people from his government he traveled, nor from what parties they represent.
A report from Madrid. Now here's a look at some of the other stories making headlines around the world.
Kenyatta has won the country's controversial rerun of the presidential elections. Results from 266 out of 291 constituencies displayed at the National Tallying Center showed Kenyatta winning 98% of the vote. On Sunday, opposition leader Raila Odinga demanded a new presidential election in 90 days, saying the country is in, quote, grave danger, unquote, of political violence. Clashes broke out at a student protest in Athens, Greece, when groups of demonstrators began firing petrol bombs and rocks at police around the parliament building. Police responded with volleys of tear gas. Hundreds of students were protesting shortages in the education system, such as school books, teachers and school supplies, to budget cutbacks. The protest in Athens was one of several demonstrations that took place nationwide. Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte has met with Prime Minister Shinzo Abe ahead of a regional summit in Manila in November. The two discussed the rebuilding of Mawari after Philippine troops battled Islamic State group militants for months. The two also discussed the threat from North Korea. Before the meeting, Rodrigo expressed his concern about North Korea.
Foremost among our shared concerns are developments in Korean Peninsula and the continuing missile launch test of North Korea.
A man is facing war crimes charges at a Dutch court, accused of incarceration, torture and the murder of 75 young prisoners in 1978. Esetu Alamu pleaded not guilty to the charges, saying prosecutors are accusing the wrong man. One of Alamu's alleged victims spoke out at the trial.
This gentleman and the regime that he was working for made my country a victim until today.
At least 2 people were killed and 16 others injured in Poland after strong winds battered northern and central Europe on Sunday. 6 firefighters were among the injured, according to a fire services spokesman. Firefighters responded to almost 8,000 calls and over 1,000 buildings were damaged. Thousands of demonstrators gathered in eastern Malta on Sunday to renew their calls for justice and governmental resignations following the killing of government critical journalist Daphne Caruana Galizia. The demonstration was organized by the Civil Society Network, where social activists, bloggers, and lawyers took part. The protest culminated in speeches in which the murder was condemned as politically motivated.
Indigenous rappers in Brazil are making noise over land rights as the National Congress considers proposals which threaten to turn their ancestral homeland into areas used for mining.
Rural indigenous rappers are making a name for themselves in Brazil, not just within their communities, but also across social media. Brazil's rapidly expanding mining industry is threatening the country's Aboriginal people. The young are taking a stand and using new ways to protest demarcation on their territories. The arrival of a right-wing government in Brazil has given the country's agribusiness even more space to thrive. According to recent data, 33 proposals are currently awaiting approval in the National Congress. Our land doesn't get us dirty. What makes us dirty is your papers and laws. Lyrics and songs are challenging the powers that be, and they're tackling racial prejudice too. Indigenous struggles are often portrayed as backward and out of touch with the modern values in Brazilian media. But these viral rap videos show an emerging indigenous youth culture, in touch with the rapidly changing pace of technology. But not everyone is aware of this new battleground.
I'm very concerned about your generations. Our youngsters are not interested in our culture, in our music, in our hairdresses, our dance, all our customs. I'm really concerned about young people. They need to continue our fight, what we are doing here, standing for our rights. They need to pursue that fight.
The protection of indigenous land has been on top priority since the implementation of the Brazilian Constitution in 1988. However, since incumbent President Michel Temer took office, his low popularity has meant he has had to reach out to some less favourable allies to cement his power. In return for backing from Brazil's agribusiness lobby, Temer has given his support to their initiatives, provoking opposition in all its forms.
And with that, we've come to the end of this midday news brief. For these and many other stories, you can find them on our website at telesurtv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Sweeney Gray. Thank you so much for watching.